Chapter 14. Guṇa-Traya Vibhāga Yoga. The Yoga of Understanding the Three Modes of Material Nature. Verse 1. Bhagavan Sri Kṛṣṇa said, I will now describe to you that knowledge which is the greatest of all types of knowledge. By knowing this, all the sages were able to attain perfection and reach the highest destination. Verse 2. By taking shelter of this knowledge, one attains my nature. He is neither born during creation, nor does he suffer during universal annihilation. Anuvrtti. In previous chapters, the modes of material nature, goodness, passion, and ignorance, Sattvaguna, Rajaguna, and Tamaguna, have been mentioned, and in this chapter they will be described in greater detail. It will also be described how one can cross beyond the material modes and become free from the cycle of birth and death. Verse 3. O Bharat, the vast expanse of material nature is my womb, which I impregnate and wherefrom all living beings manifest. Verse 4. O son of Kunti, all forms of life that are born in this world are ultimately born from the great womb of material nature, and I am the seed-giving Father. Verse 5. Goodness, passion, and ignorance are the modes born of material nature. These modes bind the immutable individual being to the material body, O mighty armed hero. Verse 6. O virtuous Arjuna, amongst these modes, goodness is free from impurities. It gives knowledge and frees one from distress. It conditions one to pleasure and knowledge. Verse 7. O son of Kunti, you should know that the mode of passion manifests desire, hankering, and attachment. It binds the embodied living beings to their actions. Verse 8. You should know that the mode of ignorance bewilders all embodied beings. O Bharat, it binds them through confusion, laziness, and excessive sleep. Verse 9. O Bharat, the mode of goodness conditions one to happiness. The mode of passion creates attachment to perform action, and the mode of ignorance covers knowledge and creates bewilderment. Verse 10. Goodness overpowers passion and ignorance. Passion defeats goodness and ignorance overcomes goodness and passion. Thus the modes continually fight for supremacy. Anuvrtti. Material nature is compared to a womb, and Sri Kṛṣṇa says that he is the seed-giving Father, aham bija pradapita. The combination of material nature and the living beings thus gives rise to the multitude of life forms, which are in turn bound by the modes of material nature and forced to act under their influence. The mode of goodness is characterized by freedom from impurities, that which gives knowledge, frees one from distress, and conditions one to pleasure and accomplishment. Passion manifests intense desire, hankering, and attachment, and binds the embodied being to his actions. Ignorance is that which bewilders all embodied beings, and constrains one through confusion, laziness, and excessive sleep. The three modes of material nature, thus, condition one to the illusion of happiness, the attachment to perform action, and bewilderment due to an insufficient fund of knowledge. The combinations of the modes of nature are endless, each fighting with the other for supremacy. Due to this, the embodied living beings are in a constant state of confusion as to the purpose of life, and the consequence is the suffering of birth, death, old age, and disease. Verse 11. When the light of knowledge illuminates all the senses of the body, it should be understood that the mode of goodness is most prevalent. Verse 12. O best of the Bharat dynasty, when the mode of passion is most predominant, one is under the influence of greed, selfish activities, ambition, restlessness, and hankering. Verse 13. O descendant of Kuru, by the influence of the mode of ignorance, then darkness, laziness, confusion, and delusion are manifest. Verse 14. When an embodied being dies under the influence of the mode of goodness, he reaches the higher planets, wherein those of great intellect reside. Verse 15. When one dies in the mode of passion, he is reborn amongst those who are attached to worldly activities. If one dies in the mode of ignorance, he takes birth again in the womb of unintelligent people. Anuvrtti. In the above 5 verses, the characteristics of the 3 modes of nature are further described, as well as their influence over the embodied living being at the time of death. When one dies in the mode of goodness, illuminated by knowledge, he reaches the higher planets, where those of great intellect reside. When one dies in the mode of passion, characterized by greed, selfish activities, ambition, restlessness, and hankering, he is reborn amongst those who are attached to worldly activities. And when the most unfortunate amongst men die in the mode of ignorance, characterized by darkness, laziness, confusion, and delusion, they take birth again in the womb of uncivilized people, or even worse, descend into the animal kingdom to become dogs, cats, and beasts of burden. Verse 16. It has been said that the result of good deeds is purity, the results of passionate activities is misery, and the result of actions in ignorance is bewilderment. Verse 17. Goodness gives birth to knowledge, passion gives rise to greed, and ignorance breeds illusion, confusion, and a lack of knowledge. Verse 18. Those in goodness attain the higher realms, those in passion remain in the middle, the earth planet, and those in ignorance descend to the lower planes of life. Verse 19. When one perceives that there is no other active agent except the modes of nature, and he knows the Supreme, he attains my nature. Verse 20. By transcending these 3 modes that appear within the body, one becomes liberated from the miseries of birth, death, old age, and other miseries. Then one tastes the nectar of immortality. Anuvrtti. Bewilderment and conditioning under the modes of material nature is difficult to overcome, but it is possible when one cultivates the knowledge of Bhagavad-gītā and applies oneself sincerely to the process of bhakti yoga. The knowledge attained through the study of Bhagavad-gītā enables one to transcend the modes of nature, because such knowledge is in itself transcendental and free from the defects of mistakes, brahma, illusion, pramada, cheating, vipralipsa, and false perception, karanapatva. In other words, the knowledge contained in Bhagavad-gītā is perfect and complete. By transcending the modes of nature, Sri Kṛṣṇa promises that one will be liberated from the miseries of birth, death, old age, and disease, and one will taste the nectar of immortality. This is also confirmed in the Ishopanishad as follows. Vidyam cha yas tadvedo bhayam saha avidyayam rityum tirtva vidyayam ritamashnute. Translation. One who transcends ignorance, avidya, and attains transcendental knowledge certainly rises above the influence of repeated birth and death, and tastes the nectar of immortality. The contemporary worldview of advancement of knowledge is that knowledge is attained through direct evidence, experiment, hypothesis, and speculation. This process of acquiring knowledge is called arohapanta, or the ascending process. However, the ascending process of knowledge relies completely on the mind, intelligence, and senses, and is thus subject to the 4 material defects of mistakes, illusion, cheating, and false perception. Accordingly, no scientific knowledge is perfect, nor can it be perfect. Truly, by the admission of many scientists, they never really attain the end of knowledge. The more they learn, the more there is to learn, or the more they learn, the more they discover that their predecessors were wrong. In any case, scientists admit that they do not have perfect knowledge. Death comes, and another generation of scientists is reduced to dust. Knowledge that is descending from Sri Kṛṣṇa and through the guru-disciple parampara is known as avarohapanta and is free from material defects. Bhagavad-gītā means the words of Sri Kṛṣṇa, hearing which enables one to achieve the perfection of life before death comes. Verse 21. Arjuna inquired, O Kṛṣṇa, by what symptoms can one who has transcended these three modes be known? How does he act, and how does he transcend these three modes? Verses 22 through 25. Bhagavan Sri Kṛṣṇa replied, One who does not like or dislike the presence of illumination, attachment, or delusion, or laments their absence, who remains dispassionate and is not affected by the modes, who remains unwavering, who is equal in both happiness and distress, who remains content in the self, who sees no intrinsic difference between a lump of earth, a stone, and gold, who remains undisturbed in both favorable and unfavorable circumstances, who is wise, to whom insult and praise are equal, who considers honor and infamy to be the same, who is impartial towards both friend and enemy, and who renounces all mundane activities. Such a person is considered to be beyond the modes of material nature. Verse 26. One who performs service to me in bhakti yoga without deviation transcends these modes of material nature and is qualified for liberation. Verse 27. I am the foundation of the immortal, imperishable Brahman, who is the basis of eternal dharma and supreme bliss. Anuvrtti. The symptoms of one who is free from the modes of nature are herein described. Such a person is equally disposed to the dualities of the material world. Such a person is not affected by happiness and distress because he knows the temporary nature of both. The liberated person is content in the cultivation of the self and is not motivated by wealth or distressed by poverty. He sees gold, dirt, or a simple stone as the same. Samaloshtashma kanchana. He is wise, considering infamy and honor the same, and has no enemies. He is impartial to both friends and foes. These are the characteristics of one who is transcendentally situated above the three modes of material nature. Srimad Bhagavatam confirms this in the following way. Sattvika karako sangi ragandho rajasasmrita tamasa smriti vibrashto nirguno mad apashtayaha. Translation. One who works free of attachment is in the mode of goodness. One who works with personal desire is in the mode of passion. One who works without discrimination of right and wrong is in the mode of ignorance. But one who takes shelter of Kṛṣṇa is understood to be transcendental to the modes of material nature. The liberated person is always situated in bhakti yoga without deviation, because he knows Sri Kṛṣṇa as the immortal, imperishable Brahman, the giver of eternal wisdom in the form of Bhagavad-gītā, and the fountainhead of supreme bliss. Om Tat Sat. Thus ends chapter 14, entitled Guṇa-Traya Vibhāga Yoga, from the conversation between Sri Kṛṣṇa and Arjuna, in the Upanishad known as Srimad Bhagavad-gītā, the Yoga Shastra of divine knowledge, from the Bhishma Parva of Mahabharata, the literature revealed by Vyas in 100,000 verses.